FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Financial Survival Network is brought to you today by Orin Resources, a junior exploration company with the appetite of a major. It's hot on the trail of the next globally significant discovery, creating enormous potential upside for you, the shareholder. Orin is one of the most aggressive exploration companies pursuing high-grade, scalable gold and copper deposits and has a premier 7-project portfolio, including its 2 flagships, Committee Bay in the Arctic and Sombrero in Peru. Orin's unparalleled technical team and highly experienced management has a history of success in advancing and monetizing exploration assets. No wonder Orin's been called one of the best in the junior exploration sector. Orin trades on the TSX and the NYSE under AUG. To learn more, go to orinresources.com. That's AURYN resources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 4/23/19. Well, trying to reason with a socialist or a liberal, it's the equivalent of what Dr. Johnson said about second marriages, the triumph of hope over experience, and someone who's been trying to talk to them for years now, but has met with about the same success as have I, is our good friend Karen Kataline, and you find her at KarenKataline.com, Kataline. Hey, as always, questions for Karen, myself, feedback on the show, anything else you want to talk about, the economy, your pocketbook, we love to hear it. Email kl@kerrylutz.com. So, Karen, hey, welcome back to the show, and trying to talk sense to a liberal. I think there's a brick wall here that I'd much rather bang my head against.
No, it's better if we try to pump up conservatives to figure out how to defeat them. That's what we have to do at this point, because some of them can't be reasoned with. And the ones that can, we got to be tough and strong and relentless, like our president. We just find our own style. We're not going to have his style. But, generally speaking, Republicans are a little too nice, especially in the current climate.
Well, we can't.
Except for when they go after each other, then they're not necessarily so nice.
Oh, you mean like Knut,
but that's another story.
Like Knut the loser Romney going after Trump about the... Man, he's such a Boy Scout. I love it. And like what Trump said, if he'd spent as much energy going after Obama, he would have been president. So, yeah. My pet peeve is when people call Mitt Romney a nice guy. He's not a nice guy. He's proven and shown that he's not a nice guy. He's a disingenuous guy who is a globalist from way back, and he seems to be trying to channel John McCain. It's ugly. So it's just add that to the list of enemies that Trump has and has biff, pow, squash that he's done with his opponents. It's like Batman. He just keeps on squishing them. God willing, he'll continue. We just got to give him some extra support. Mm-hmm. Well, he's doing okay on his own here, but you can never get too much support. So this whole socialist thing, I can't believe that we're even discussing it. We spent the Cold War fighting it. Throughout history, socialism has always failed. I can't think of one instance where it succeeded. Can you?
No. And it just seems as if every generation has to learn the same lessons over and over again. This being the Holy Week or 8 days of Passover, do you have time to indulge me for a little story in the Passover Haggadah, the story of the Exodus of the Jewish people? In the end of the Haggadah, it says that every generation of Jews will face annihilation. And it seems as if every generation of Americans Because after all, we're all about freedom. That's what America stands for. Freedom, liberty, individual responsibility has to learn about authoritarianism and dictatorship. And unfortunately, the left has been engaged in indoctrinating kids to unlearn what we should have been teaching them all along and what we learned in school, albeit a little bit mild. And so we got our work cut out for us.
Well,
I'm relatively optimistic. I think we can do it in the age of social media. You can turn opinions around rather quickly.
Hey, and I've got a little quote here for you.
Get our job. Yeah.
I got a little quote here for you, adapted from Love. The original quote is, "The heart has its reasons of which reason knows nothing." Well, I would substitute the heart for socialism, and socialism has its reasons of which reason knows nothing, right? It's a failed system.
Yeah.
I will accept there's an argument to be made that modern democracy is teetering and in many respects has failed over the past 20 or 30 years. I'll definitely accept that. But I won't accept that capitalism has failed. Capitalism, where it's allowed to flourish in its most purest forms, almost always succeeds. And we have many, many instances throughout history of that being the case.
Well, as you well know, we're not a democracy. And we've lost a lot of our free markets because the left continues to march towards socialism. And they don't just talk about it. And now they're admitting it, many of them, the younger generation, too stupid or naive to lie about it. So I think that's a good thing generally. But we're not a democracy. We're a republic. And part of their plan to dismantle our country and dismantle the greatness of America is to pull apart that republic, to pull apart the separation of powers, and try to continually move towards central planning and authoritarianism. This is not America when they do that. And a lot of us are still asleep, not us, not your listeners, not you and me, but a lot of people are still asleep about the ways in which they're doing that.
Very, very true. And it's done in very sneaky ways because it's a complete avoidance of the facts. For instance, the crash of 2008 and 2009, they blame it on capitalism. But the fact is we haven't had capitalism in this country for many, many years. There's so many factors involved in that crash, many of them dealing with government, the role of government, and the abuse of the role of government. We could go on, but the Community Reinvestment Act, artificially low interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. You could go down the list. You know it as well as I do. And yet, the way that the left excels is by never actually getting into a discussion, a debate over the true facts.
Yeah, and they never admit responsibility or culpability for anything. I mean, look at them. They cause the problem, and then they blame their opponents for the problem and say, "Oh, I know how to fix that. More government." Mm-hmm. That's what they always do. Yeah. I was sort of going to mention, and I know you were going to too, my recent article in Western Journal called Imposing Socialism on America, One State at a Time. The sneaky thing they're doing now is they have nationally backed huge money and these special interest groups. And what are they doing? They're running these bills, these outrageous bills that are pure socialism in their intent, in friendly Democrat state legislatures, and building their constituency there. It's very, very evil, and a lot of Republicans nationwide don't know that this is happening. If they live in a somewhat friendly Republican state, they don't know it's happening, but it's going to, hit them on the head like an anvil, because socialists are never content with just a few states. they're going to force these ideas on America, as I said in Western Journal, one state at a time. Mm-hmm. That's why I wrote it, was so that hopefully a national audience could, be on alert for what it is that's going on. Things like the red flag bill, which is incredibly evil. Whichever one you want to talk about, you let me know which one you want to talk about. But there are a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I think we talked about that previously. So let's just say that we know these red flag bills are pernicious, and their ultimate goal is to eliminate the Second Amendment. So we know that's for sure. But how do we fight this?
Well, the canary in the mine shaft, at least one of them, a state that used to be purple, and before that, I hate using those colors because the left should be red, really. Absolutely. But, the media told us what colors to use, and we went with it, which we shouldn't have done. Nonetheless, Colorado was a well-known swing state. But in the last election, in the midterms, 2018, they lost all elected power, from the state legislature, both houses, to the governor's mansion. All of it was lost. So if you want to see, as I put in that piece, leftist nirvana, just look at, forgive me, I have a leaf blower out here. You might hear a little bit of a buzz in the background. I apologize.
We're pretty good.
If you want to see what, it's a beautiful day. It's spring in Colorado, in northern Colorado. If you want to see what the leftist nirvana looks like, just look at the kind of stuff they're passing. They're not just running it, they're passing it with not enough Republican votes to stop it. Things like forced sex education with no opt-out for parents, where they teach LGBTQ, XYZ sex practices to grade schoolers. Now, granted, sex education in public school as it is, and charter schools, are bad enough, because who agrees on how to teach it? I would so much prefer if parents would teach it. The public schools do a lousy, rotten job of teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. We don't want them teaching sex. But now the left wants to teach and indoctrinate kids about transgenderism and all kinds of crazy sex practices. And they want to include abortion in the discussions about birth control. They're teaching grade schoolers about birth control. This is outrageous. And guess who is funding this in a really big way? I'll bet you could guess.
Planned Parenthood or
Planned Parenthood. Tax-funded Planned Parenthood, one of the great money laundering organizations where they take tax dollars, they funnel them back into Democrat organizations and into disgusting sex education in the public schools. It's quite a scheme that they've got going. So yes, Planned Parenthood. You can even go to their website and find out which states have been co-opted into passing this. And the problem is it's forced. Parents don't even get to opt out. It's very obvious what they're trying to do. They're trying to indoctrinate. Remember when what we used to call the radical right or the hard right used to say, the reason we don't want to accept gays is that they're just going to try and indoctrinate and try to push people into their lifestyle, and modern thinkers like myself, and I never had a problem with whatever someone does in their bedroom as long as there's an adult and they're over 21 and they're at the age of consent, and who they're doing it with is consenting as well. And yet, this is exactly what they're doing. They are teaching. They are indoctrinating people into gender dysphoria. So that's only one of the many examples of things that they're doing to impose socialism on America, one state at a time. Would you like to hear another one?
Sure, why not?
The national popular vote. Now, this is the purview, ought to be, and is, of the U.S. Congress, right?
Yeah, and the Constitution.
The left has been pushing getting rid of the Electoral College forever. ever. They only do it because they think they could win better with the popular vote. Well, we don't have a popular vote, as I'm sure your listeners and you understand. The Electoral College was an integral part of making sure that little states didn't get gobbled up and pushed around by big states, and that a state was a sovereign entity. We're the United States of America, not, the national state of America. And so a state like Colorado gets gobbled up by New York and California, which, by the way, just happen to be Democrat-dominated states. So what are they going to do?
Purely a coincidence.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't think anything negative about. We're being so sarcastic here. So what they're doing is they're putting together this national pact, which is just outrageous, to get as many states, all of them, most of them Democrat states, with however many electoral college votes they have, to agree through legislatures to go whichever way the popular vote goes. So if you're in a flyover state like Colorado, your vote for president doesn't matter at all because it's going to go to the big states like California and New York, regardless of what you do. So the outrage is that our hard progressive leftist governor, Jared Polis, got voted into office fair and square by people in Colorado who voted for him. And now what was one of the first things he did, he already passed it, he signed a law by the legislature that Colorado voters don't get to vote for president. Their vote doesn't count. Now, talk about irony. There's one. I could go into more detail, but I don't want to put your listeners to sleep. That's the gist of it. And they're trying to push this in every state in the union. And when they get to a 270, which, by the way, just happens to be the number of electoral votes required to win the presidency, they claim they will have abolished the electoral college. I beg to differ. I don't think they will. But this shows you how authoritarian the left has become now. It's no longer we're going to try to persuade you. It's we're going to force you. As much as we can force you, we're going to force you. And that's not America.
Definitely. You have a point there. Little scary, the things that they're trying to pull. And all of the leading Democratic candidates for president also want to dispense with the Electoral College.
Because they think they'll win that way.
Winning.
I contend that if for 1 second the left thought that they could win by keeping the Electoral College and stop talking about the national popular vote, they'd be all for the Electoral College.
For sure.
Duh.
For sure. So where does this leave us here, Karen? Thinking critical people, what are you supposed to do?
What are you supposed to do? Yes, well, Colorado is a perfect example of a state that currently has no legislative power, and yet the citizens of Colorado have been blindsided by all of this that's going on because the left and the Democrats and all the people in the legislature did not run on any of these things. They didn't say, oh, by the way, when I get in office, I'm going to take away your right to vote for president. By the way, I'm going to shut down all oil and gas production in Colorado, one of the biggest industries in Colorado that provides tons of jobs and livelihoods all over Colorado and keeps downtown Denver rented in some of the biggest office buildings. They're going to try and force a recession in one of the great economies currently. They're just doing one thing after another. Everything you can think of, they're doing. Well, there are resistance-type fledgling groups cropping up on all these issues. There was such an outcry for this thing called I don't know if we've talked about it, you and I, but it's just outrageous. Everything they're doing is outrageous. Called safe injection sites.
Oh, those are great.
Is supposed to allow IV drug users to defy federal law and go into a place under medical supervision and shoot up drugs. And if they OD and a nice little medical supervisor is there and administers Narcan, they've saved their life. Now, if they OD right outside the building or in an alleyway nearby, then of course, that doesn't count. I mean, this is insanity. It enables drug use. It destroys neighborhoods. There was such an outcry on a local talk radio station that they had to table this until next year, which they will try to pass again, because it's backed by George Soros and his enormous money. And you have to ask yourself, what possible good comes from enabling drug use into cities? Well, George Soros doesn't have any love for this country. Nonetheless, to answer your question, people are fighting back even if they don't have legislative votes. They're doing so by doing recalls. Even Jared Polis himself is under recall now. It'll be difficult to succeed because some ungodly number of signatures is required, 600,000 plus. But a lot of these legislators who made this happen are being recalled, and the public is up in arms in Colorado.
For good reason.
So there's your answer. You can always fight back, and you should never give up when it has to do with a righteous cause like liberty and the liberty of your children's future.
Agreed there. Hey,
if I said that right.
Yep, you got it. Yep. So you got a podcast. Where do we find you at?
You can find my podcast, op-eds, blog posts, you name it, more than you want to know about me, at KarenKataline.com. I do a show every week on Tuesdays, spouting off, and all you got to do is go to my website, KarenKataline.com, and click on that at showtime, which is 2 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Eastern. My op-eds, blog posts, the latest one I was talking about, Western Journal, is up there on the front page, and the archives are there. I would love to hear from people on Twitter, Facebook, and as I like to say, that is as much social media as I care to do.
All right. Hey, well, we'll be sure to check you out. Make sure you check out Karen at KarenKataline.com. Hey, and as always, check out the site, Financial Survival Network. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter. Got one going out this week, I promise. And if you're listening to this on a podcast platform or on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. It's the only way left that we can get ideas such as Karen's out there into the marketplace of ideas and actually start having debates and winning them. Karen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Always good to talk to you, Kerry. Thanks for having me.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Today's show is brought to you by Blue Sky Uranium Corporation. Blue Sky has first mover advantage in Argentina in the world's newest uranium and vanadium district. With an existing near-surface deposit that's open for expansion, Blue Sky also controls a massive district-scale land package with mineralization along a 145-kilometer-long trend. Blue Sky possesses tremendous exploration upside and is an excellent leveraged play on rising uranium and vanadium prices. The company is run by a best-in-class management and technical team with proven exploration and development success in Argentina. Blue Sky Uranium trades under the ticker symbol BSK on the Toronto Venture Exchange and as BKUCF on the OTC. For more information and to stay on top of the latest news, go to blueskyuranium.com. That's blueskyuranium.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I am Kerry Lutz. It's 4/23/19. There's a lot of different ways to look at the world. We know it. Left, right, top, bottom, center, all of those things. And that applies doubly for investing, for building wealth. And really the definition of investing is a process utilized or undergone to help build wealth through investing. I hate using the word to define the word because, that's what the dictionaries all do. But you're going to find out about fearless wealth very shortly. Hey, as always, we invite you to be a part of the show and write us, email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, fearless wealth. Person you're about to hear from has devoted his life to fearless wealth, and you can find his work over at fearlesswealth.com. I'm talking about RC Peck. RC, you got this site, Fearless Wealth. You're all about looking at things differently, square peg, round hole, etc. What is fearless wealth?
Fearless wealth is my take on really increasing your units of wealth in your life. And one of the first things I noticed when I started investing was I was bouncing between two types of scaredness. Adults don't use the word scaredness, but they probably should. Two types of fear. One fear was I did not want to lose money, right? I did not want to lose money. And that would motivate me to do certain things, which may or may not be good for me. But then I got pushed to a different type of fear. And it was the fear of the parade going by without me. Oh, I've got to get in. I've got
FOMO.
to get into the parade.
Right? Fear of missing out.
It's become an acronym now and it gets thrown around. But the problem with acronyms and jargon is like people start to use them and they actually forget the experience of them. But yeah, it's the fear of having something happen without, you being part of it. But I noticed it wasn't greed. Like I didn't find greed from individual investors when they made a mistake, right? What I found was, I was so worried. I was so scared. I was like, gosh, this core emotion, this core feeling is at the center of most investing. And because I'm dyslexic, I don't think in words or sentences or paragraphs. I think in images. And so early on, I started looking at investment problems by looking at price charts because my brain can make sense of, it's going up and to the right. That's probably safer than down and to the right. So it kind of started with me solving my own problem, which was I wanted to figure it out. Reading was exceptionally difficult for me. And I kind of came across price charts and started really doing a deep dive into the feelings, the behavior, the psychology, the emotion of investing back in the 90s.
Right. So if I could paraphrase it, winning isn't the main thing. Winning is the only thing. Making money isn't the main thing. It's the only thing that we care about with investing. So you're a bit dyslexic. So you had to, what people with so-called learning disabilities have to do is develop different ways to download information, and you need to come up with different coping skills because the way that the so-called normal population functions really is standardized. But for people outside the box, right, outside the norm, outside the envelope, you have to kind of do this on your own, whether you have ADHD or any other number of different wiring, I guess, for your brain. So you got to come up with different ways to make things work and to function in the world, which obviously you have done. So that must have been a real struggle.
Yes, it was. I probably graduated high school at the fourth grade reading level, and yet I graduated with like a 3.3 out of a 4, simply because they took every art class in my high school. And then my art teachers would make up art classes for me. And I figured early on that an A in art was worth 4 points and an A in English was worth 4 points. So unless someone wanted to know how I made all my A's, they would just see the net result of, he's like a B+ person. But honestly, I was probably a C person with a, triple A+ art brain.
But one thing that people with these types of, I hesitate to call them afflictions, I call it a challenge, because really who you are, really everything about you sprang from dyslexia, is that you have to have a really good memory and you have to look for connections in order to fortify your memory and to be able to work in society at large, right?
Yeah, and it's a yes and I didn't know I had dyslexia, right? I just knew like I'm not dumb, but why do I sometimes feel dumb? But I'm not dumb, but why do I something's wrong here? And I kind of I empathize with the investor because you have an investor who's like, but I'm not dumb. I earn well. I'm smart. But what's going on? But I'm not dumb. But wait, how come this isn't working? So I'm able to step kind of on that person's back and go, I get it. You weren't maybe shown the best map of the territory, or you weren't given the right compass or your compass that helps you. And so I think just being able to understand how someone who earns well and has done everything the right way and got the right degrees can still go, something's off. Like, why isn't my wealth better or bigger? Because I'm working my butt off. Something's wrong.
Mm-hmm. So, there's something off. You don't know what it is, and they haven't figured out what it is. Your teachers, the administrators, all the people in school, they don't know because they just cater to the middle, not the high, not the low, and not anyone who's off the charts. So obviously at some point here, RC, you had an epiphany. How did that happen?
It probably happened it was in my 20s. My first job out of college was selling medical software in Asia. I earned well, came home and said, I'm going to figure out investing. My two loves in my late teens and early 20s was Asia and investing. So I come home and I start doing a deep dive into investing, and I approach literally anyone who will listen to me. I go on Wall Street, I go on the pits in the Twin Towers when they were there. And I would literally say, look, I'll pay you to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
And someone would be like, look, you need to have an annuity. You got to have an annuity, RC. I'm like, all right, well, how much should I put in? Give me $5,000 a year for the next 40 years, and you're going to have this much. And the first thing my brain went was like, how do I know that's best for me? And my brain was like, I need to see a picture of it. I need to, okay, that's a big number, but is that what's best? And I was kind of Tom Hanks from the movie Big. Like, it didn't make sense. Like, well, okay, but how do I know that works? And they kept showing me words, and I kept going, well, show me an image or show me. And I knew what the S&P could do over 20 or 30 or 40 years with 5,000. And so I kept asking, and I wasn't doing it to annoy them or anger them, but I just started noticing, well, wait a second, if the price line's not going higher and the words say it should, which one should I believe, right? If a company beats their earnings and their earnings per share is up and their net income is up and everyone's high-fiving and the price continues to fall, okay, but which one should I believe? And I was just like, I'm going to believe the price because that's the way my account gets bigger. And I came at it just naive because I didn't grow up in the industry. I just wanted to know what really worked. And I was like, oh, well, price seems to matter more than, that company, they missed their earnings. They really missed their earnings. And their stock went up and their stock hit a new lifetime high. Wait a second, should I just continue looking at pictures? And so what I found was this was a very, very, very unpopular point of view when I would talk to, and I am an advisor, but when I talk to advisors and money managers, they'd be like, that doesn't make sense. Or they would, poo-poo it. And I'm like, I don't know, I think there might be something here. And so it gave me a level of clarity, right? It was almost like, oh my gosh, I have dyslexia. This is why I had those feelings. This is how to see it clearly. But using that metaphorically with investing, I understand now with investing, price matters most. Focus on price, not words.
Mm-hmm. So it's all about price. And for somebody like you, that was something you could really focus on.
And it seemed real. Like no one's ever re-reported their price. Sorry, guys, 8 months later, the price 8 months ago that we missed price. No, it's history. You don't change price. You don't adjust price. Like that's what the price is. You may not believe it or want it to be that, but no one restates price. And I was like, wow, okay, that has some legitimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I can see that. So now fast forward to 2019. Here you are. You've been teaching people a system that you've developed. How does that work?
Well, I mean, the investing part is the easiest. The behavioral part is the hardest. And most people look at the behavioral part last. I know it's more popular today, but when I started this 2 decades ago, it was really looked down upon. So one of the first things I do with all people is I have them connect to their money. I don't ask them what they're spending on lattes. I simply say, do you actually know how to connect with your money? Do you know how to listen to your money? Like your money is trying to tell you something. Did you know that? And so one of the very first things I do is I have them connect to it. And I do it by getting them just really clear about, great, what's your net wealth? What are the 4 parts that make up your net wealth? Let's look at the actual numbers, right? So when you lift the hood on your net wealth, there's only 4 parts to the engine. You don't need to go to school for 4 years. You go, these are my 4 parts. Is any one of them not working, meaning falling? So I have them connect to it in a very black and white way. And the neat thing about money or wealth, unlike health or relationships, is it's really agnostic. It doesn't give you high fives or accolades for effort or bonus. It literally just looks at the bottom number. And it's one of the only things that you literally can give to your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids and your great-great-great-great. Like, you can't give them your health necessarily, and you can't give them your great relationships, but it's something that you can actually give to others. And it's such an amazing teacher, because if you understand how to connect to your money and you know how to listen to it, then the filter you've built, like, you know how to filter out the noise. And we all know the noise is incredibly loud today. So to answer your question, it's really just understanding how to connect to your money properly so you can listen to it.
So connect with your money to listen to it. And so when people work with you, how do you do this?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is most people have actually never been trained on their net wealth, right? You may go to Stanford. Stanford's really about finding a job. That's about earning money. Reading books is information important, but it's intellectual knowledge and not experiential knowledge. So one of the first things I want them to do is to have it be an experience of being trained. Like, you're going to get trained just like the, astronauts going to the moon. It was about training. It wasn't about books. So I get them trained by literally almost forcing them to write down what their trades have been. For example, someone comes into my world and they're like, I want to be a better trader. Okay, let me see the last year of your trades. If they've done a lot, let's call it 120 trades. So they'll balk at this. They're like, I don't have time to, I need to get better at this. Like, so right away, I know something's wrong. But when they actually do take the coaching and they do the 120 trades and they look at them, that alone starts giving them huge insight. I then look at it and go, oh, did you realize out of your 120 trades, 109 of them had you losing money? Did you realize 12% of them you were in and out in the same day? And they're like, no, I wasn't. I'm like, I'm looking at the trade dates. So a lot of people don't even know what's actually happening. They're doing what they think is happening. And so getting them to, force is maybe not the right word, but force them to connect to what is actually happening and show it to them in a clear way, it literally starts reshaping and rewiring their brain to like, oh my gosh, I've kind of been out of control. And so I go through that interaction where they have to connect with their money. And so they start learning like, oh, wow, okay, I've been abusing my money. It's not the economy.
Yeah. So you got some success stories you can share with us?
I mean, I have lots of them. I mean, the thing I'm probably most proud of is that this training does transform people's lives. So one of the things that I hear most about is, or the people who probably come into my world the most, are those who have figured out the earnings part, but not the keeping it and growing it part. And they don't want to keep getting rich over and over. And so one success story was actually with a guy, and guys are harder to train than women, than gals.
Why is that?
They're more resistant to almost everything.
Yeah, really? Huh.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not surprised.
I mean, I'm 48. I'm 48 this year, but I started this when I was 28. So people would hire me who were 10, 20 years older than me and had a lot more money, and I'd have to confront them and be like, yeah, I think you're lying to me. And, no one probably told the 58-year-old CEO that he's lying. But what I found was when they stopped defending, and the guy's like, look, when I noticed when I stopped defending and I started actually looking at it, what he noticed was this specific guy used to live in Silicon Valley. He said, I didn't realize how loud the noise was blaring in my ear. I didn't realize the level of angst and overwhelm and stress. And once you kind of forced me, like, because I didn't in a way, I didn't care if he liked me. And I say that to my training clients. Your job is not to be like, oh, I like our seat, right? And you shouldn't have to trust me. You should be able to know how to verify what I'm saying. And so what he said, he goes, I didn't always like you. And I always thought I had to trust and like someone who was talking to me about my money because I didn't have the compass or the map. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. But now that I know how to verify, of course I trust and like you, but I don't have to. And he was actually surprised how much unnecessary effort and pain and busyness and scaredness there actually was. And this is, by the way, an accomplished man in his 40s that runs, a company in Silicon Valley. So even using this type of language was unusual for him. But he's like, not only am I clear now how to keep it and grow it, but my wife actually notices that I'm a much calmer person than I used to be because the noise has been turned off.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha. So interesting. And so can you just do this with anyone, or are some people just impossible to educate?
Yeah, some people are absolutely impossible to educate. Some will say they want to be trained. They may use those words, but they don't actually want to, right? They want to keep going to the weekend workshops, and they want to keep reading the books, and they learn the terms and the jargon, but it gets down to actually shifting the way they behave. Mm-hmm. It's very different. So what I learned was the more someone pays to get trained, the more likely they will actually change their behavior. Now, you don't need to charge $1 million. So if you did, I know Tony Robbins charges $1 or $2 million with his one-on-one clients. And one of the first things he says to them is, hey, what's your health? What's your weight? Yeah, you need to fix that immediately. Like if you want to work on your business and your marriage and you're 85 pounds overweight, that's not going to work. Well, guess what? You just paid the guy $2 million. So what are you going to do? You're going to lose the 85 pounds. So there's a behavioral part to it that most people aren't willing to make the commitment. And what I've noticed is a general causation between the more somebody makes, generally speaking, if they make over 100 or 200,000, the more likely they are into behaving a different way. But if someone, say, makes 50,000, they're much more defensive on what you're suggesting. Like they'll go in defense, like, I don't have the time, I don't have this. And I'm not diminishing people who make 50. I'm simply noticing that there's a causation with someone, all things being equal. If you gave me two people, Carrie, one makes 50, one makes 250, and they both paid the same dollar amount. Let's just say the dollar amount was $10,000 to get trained.
Right.
Or it's $10,000 for the one and $5,000 for the other. I can tell you the person who makes 250 and spent the 10K, they are committed to changing their behavior, and they're less likely to use defensive language than the person who's making 50. Mm-hmm. And by the way, what I just said to you is incredibly unpopular and will probably trigger a lot of people.
Oh, well, what can you do? So when we look at this whole thing and we look at the mess the economy's in now, what are the key things you need to keep track of to not get burnt?
I think the number one thing is there are blocking and tackling type of behavior that will never break. For example, did you actually transfer some of your net wealth to your future? Right? I didn't use the word save. I used the word transfer to your future. Your future usually means a retirement account. So are you doing that behavior of transferring a number to your future? Most people are not. If those who are, it's like, okay, so you have that part done. The second thing is you may live in the U.S. economy, but you have your own economy. Like, how is your own economy doing? And that economy is made up of really two things. What you're able to generate, let's say you make $85,000 a year, and then what you're able to transfer to your future. Those are key components that they can't be thought around, they can't be IQ'd around, it's a do not pass go thing. You have to transfer money to your future. And then once it's there in those accounts, you have to look at the price, because price knows more than almost everything. Of course it can be wrong, but it's the least wrong of all the measurements of what you're doing, right? So you take the money you've transferred, You say, okay, I got to get it on a line that's going up and to the right. You can beware of PE ratios and the economy and quantitative easing and trade wars and all these other words, but ultimately your net wealth goes up if it's on that black line that's also going up. I am oversimplifying it a little bit because there, of course, are nuances to it. But what I guess I want you to most hear is that the question can be complicated, right? Like the economy or the stock market. But the answer or the solution can actually be powerfully simple. And many times the powerfully simple answer is the one that breaks least and really can help people the most.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha. All right. So if you're looking to shift your investment philosophy around and to start doing things right and following the line up to the right instead of down to the right, what do you do? How do we contact you?
The easiest way to kind of come into my world or come to my Kool-Aid stand is to go to fearlesswealth.com. That is the place to find me. It's been the place for 20 years and probably will be for another 20. So the next step is the easiest, and that's just to visit that site and get connected.
All right. It sounds really good. Hey, any questions or comments for RC or myself? Email us kl@kerrylutz.com. Make sure you check out our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for the newsletter, and please subscribe, like, and share, whether you're listening to a podcast or a YouTube video. It really helps us a lot when you do that. It helps us get out ideas like RC's, which are desperately needed. RC, really appreciate you coming on the show. Good luck.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Today's show is brought to you by Blue Sky Uranium Corporation. Blue Sky has first mover advantage in Argentina in the world's newest uranium and vanadium district. With an existing near-surface deposit that's open for expansion, Blue Sky also controls a massive district-scale land package with mineralization along a 145-kilometer-long trend. Blue Sky possesses tremendous exploration upside and is an excellent leverage play on rising uranium and vanadium prices. The company is run by a best-in-class management and technical team with proven exploration and development success in Argentina. Blue Sky Uranium trades under the ticker symbol BSK on the Toronto Venture Exchange and as BKUCF on the OTC. For more information and to stay on top of the latest news, go to blueskyuranium.com. That's blueskyuranium.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 4/24/19. Well, you know that things are just inexplicable, that there is no way forward in so many ways, and yet we have to move forward. And the question is, how do we do it? Well, as always, we invite you to be a part of the show. Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. So Eric Hadik is with us now from Inside Track. That's inside, INSIIDE track.com. And Eric, as always, it's great to have you. So the market's going to new highs. How can this be happening when everything else seems to be in the dumps?
Well, I think there's a lot of potential reasons for that, but as you know, I'm always looking at the technical and the cyclical outlook, which reveal what's going on. It's not just hocus pocus of numbers or time frames, but it's a clock to the markets, revealing the rhythms that are there. And the equity markets in particular, from a broader perspective, nothing has changed about the outlook for 2019. And my general outlook that I've talked about since late 2018, early 2019 was that the markets were poised for a 6 to 12 month bottom in late 2018. And that should yield to an overall advance into May of this year, when one of the prevailing monthly cycles that helped time the September-October peak last year would come back into play. And the interesting thing is, whereas a lot of the intermediate cycles vary from index to index, stock to stock, depending on what their specific rhythms are in the market. This is one of those cycles that has governed everything from global equity indexes, the European stocks indexes, which helped pinpoint the September 2018 peak and looked forward from there to the next high in May of 2019. And it's governed a lot of different equity markets. And the interesting thing to me, too, is that last year I talked about the energy equity connection, just that how at the major turning points, the oil markets and the stock markets seem to move in tandem. And that was the case in September, October of last year, then again in late December. And cycles are shaping up to show the same thing for May of this year, where also crude oil cycles are projecting a top. So it could be something related to that as well.
So you're thinking that oil is kind of coming to a peak here? Because I don't know if you've been to the pump lately, but it's over $3 a gallon here in Florida. So it's telling me it's starting to bump up against that ceiling, huh?
Well, there still is a little time left in the cycles, so that's when I really need to get down to the day-to-day and week-to-week price action and see what that is portending for this time frame. But there still is some leeway and potential there for a little bit additional highs before a peak is seen, but we're certainly coming to the latter stages of those cycles and of this uptrend.
Mm-hmm. And so these cycles, is it unusual for a lot of cycles to peak at once? Does that happen often?
Well, like I said, if you're referring to what I was commenting about the different equity markets, it's more a case of when we have those bigger cycles, when there are more significant turning points, then you almost want them to come together, to converge there in a narrow window of time. But a lot of times you'll see a sequence of kind of diverging cycles where a particular index, or when we're talking about something like the metals, gold and silver and platinum and copper, often will peak or bottom sequentially, where one sets its major high or low, then maybe a month later, that particular one rebounds to a lower high, but another one rallies to its major high. And I often equate that sequence to like a roller coaster going off over the summit, where each car peaks at a different time before the big descent takes hold. And so that's what you see a lot of times, but it really generates more attention and triggers me to stand up and take notice when several of them are all coming together at the same point in time. And that often is when it's kind of giving an omen of some sort of more significant fundamental or geopolitical event that could turn markets all at once.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go down the markets. So stock market, what's ahead of us here?
Well, I think that we're just going to see a lot of multi-month swings throughout this year, and I've equated that to even looking back at 40 years ago when I talk about a 40-year cycle, and I only use that as a very broad stroke or general comparative measure, but equating to a market like we saw in the late 70s, where, and that too had come a few years after a major downturn in the early 70s. And so you saw something where there were multiple 15 to 20% declines in about a 3 or 4 year period, but each one of those was separated by significant rallies that would often take the market back up to its previous high. And there's been a lot of things coming together in late 2018 and reinforced in early 2019 that just confirm that potential to me, that I don't expect to see some 1 to 2 year trending market in equities, but instead just these 3 to 4 month swings in both directions. And so I think that's going to continue through the year and even into early 2020. And we'll probably see some pretty significant resistance encountered in some of the lagging indexes that haven't reached their September, October peaks yet.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. So let's take a look at precious metals real quick. What are you seeing there? I remember seeing one of your reports a few months ago. You were more or less neutral for the rest of the year.
Well, I think the report you're probably talking to is the one that came out on February 20th and was called Precious or Gold and Silver 2019, a cycle crescendo, saying that we had just gone into the culmination of some cycle highs there during the week of February 19th to the 22nd, and that peak should hold for several months. But that doesn't mean that I'm anticipating a new downtrend. It just means that we'd seen the culmination of gold's rally since August, and that it was going to take several months of some consolidation to kind of set a higher plateau and prepare for another leg up later on in the year. So I do think that we are in a developing uptrend. Another report that I'd done back in September of 2018, talking about a major bottom, was explaining how the overall uptrend was expected to last into late 2020 or early 2021. So it's in that context that I'm talking about a multi-month peak here, some consolidation. And actually, when we hit that peak in February and the 3 to 6 month trading strategy that had been published in our publications was saying to get out of long positions, the price levels that were given to start to re-enter long positions have just been hit in gold. Silver has not quite hit it yet. So it tells me that the correction has done much of what was anticipated from it, and that over the next couple of weeks we should see a bottom forming here and start to prepare for a new 2 to 3 month, maybe 3 to 6 month uptrend. But it would take some time before it would break out above those late February highs.
Interesting. So dollar, you've pretty much called it. It's been kind of trading in a channel, but going up a bit higher. What are you looking at for the dollar?
The dollar keeps hanging on up here. I really thought that it would start to sell off a little sooner than this. We peaked in November, really, and retested that in December, just below the 98 level in the dollar index. And with the amount of times we've tested that, it wouldn't be surprising to see a brief spike through it. But I've been anticipating a bit more of a corrective move in the dollar, a little bit more of a sell-off, which has not materialized yet. So I'm certainly watching it to see if there's something I've missed, something I'm wrong on, or if it's just timing is really dragging out here, because it's pretty interesting for it to stay in a range like this for this long, and so the next couple of weeks are critical where that's concerned.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked about oil. You think that's going to pull back a bit, huh?
Once it has set that peak, which, like I said, I think is still a little bit in the future, but I think we are really vacillating between multi-year highs that were set in September, October of last year, and what was projected to be a 6 to 12 month bottom in late December, early January. So I think it's confined to that trading range through the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And what else? What other markets you're looking at that we should think about?
There are a lot of the primary ones. Just trying to think if interest rates and
Right.
bonds and notes are one other that that I've been looking for a slow, steady rally into early June. So that would mean slightly declining rates, or at least the perception. The actual physical rates may not drop via the Fed or anything, but their perception swings that way. And if bonds and notes can rally into early June, then I think that they would be primed for a new leg down, which would be the potential for a new bump up in interest rates, and that may factor into some of these other things that we're talking about.
And so, what about the economy as a whole? You have any thoughts about that?
Not any real strong ones. That's not my strong suit. So I'm probably better off just sticking with the specific markets that I feel more comfortable analyzing.
Sure. We can glean our own ideas from the projections that you're making there. And yeah, it's, things never exactly go the way you intuitively or intellectually expect. There's always a monkey wrench somewhere. I don't know, not to get political here, but the whole Trump administration kind of turned out much differently than anybody really expected.
Yeah, I think every few months you get curveballs in both directions. One time it looks like the forces working against him are gaining some synergy and gaining some momentum, and then all of a sudden that swings on a dime and things start to look very favorable, and then back and then forth. There still are some major things that are overshadowed by the political news. You still do have the U.S.-China trade challenges, conflict going on, and no real complete resolution to that yet. That's one of those things that when you least expect it, when the market and the news is quiet, all of a sudden you get rumblings out of those negotiations, positive or negative. The last couple of months, that most of them have been slanting positive, and then you have your global geopolitical things going on too, like the recent ramping up of the Iran sanctions towards the other countries doing business with Iran, and what's that going? Each time that the heat is turned up on that, is it going to spur anything? I've done a lot of analysis when I talk about this 40-year cycle. It's very intriguing to me what went on during 1979, 40 years ago. And starting in April of 1979, where Iran is concerned, and their elections and the coming to power of Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iranian Revolution, and then leading to the American embassy hostage taking and an oil crisis. And the funny thing is that 40-year cycle has timed Middle East challenges, shall we say, going back hundreds of years. And so that's another thing that's just kind of on my radar. And I never expect it to be anything even remotely like what it was during the previous cycle, but something still related to the Middle East, something still kind of signaling that ongoing shift in geopolitical power. And so this period, starting in April of 2019, is when I'm starting to look for the different rumblings there. And, it's even intriguing when you start to hear the murmurings about Jared Kushner and company getting ready to put forth an Israel-Palestinian peace plan. I think for June is what they're talking about now, and how that would be received, because that could, you could get two polar opposite, diametrically opposed reactions to something like that. Yeah. So I think that the Middle East is certainly a place to keep our eye on for the remainder of this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, hey, thank you for the insights, and just tell us all the sites where we can find your work at.
Well, InsideTrackTrading.com is our primary site, and as you mentioned before, it's got the extra I in the middle, INSIIDE, tracktrading.com. And 40-year cycle with the numbers 40-year cycle is where we archive a lot of previous analysis, posts, articles that deal with this 40-year cycle that I'm often discussing.
All right.
So they're the two primary places to go.
Great. And as always, you'll find a link in the show notes to Eric's sites. And questions, comments, email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Eric, it's always a pleasure. Good luck. We'll talk to you in a month.
Thank you, Kerry.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Financial Survival Network is brought to you today by Orin Resources, a junior exploration company with the appetite of a major. It's hot on the trail of the next globally significant discovery, creating enormous potential upside for you, the shareholder. Orin is one of the most aggressive exploration companies pursuing high-grade, scalable gold and copper deposits, and has a premier 7-project portfolio, including its 2 flagships, Committee Bay in the Arctic and Sombrero in Peru. Orin's unparalleled technical team and highly experienced management has a history of success in advancing and monetizing exploration assets. No wonder Orin's been called one of the best in the junior exploration sector. Orin trades on the TSX and the NYSE under AUG. To learn more, go to orinresources.com. That's AURYN resources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 4/25/19. Well, if you've been watching the Obamacare drama unfold, you've probably seen that recently the case is back in court, and the U.S. Justice Department, the Department of Justice, rather than defending a lawfully passed statute, has come out against it, agreeing that with the opposition that Obamacare is, in fact, unconstitutional due to the elimination of the individual mandate. One other thing that's come up recently on Obamacare, 1.6 million less people have health insurance since 2016. My, what could be going on? Hey, as always, we invite you to become a part of the show and email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, person who is an expert in healthcare policy has written books about it. The latest, The False Promise of Single-Payer Healthcare. I'm talking about Sally C. Pipes. Sally, you've been on this case for a long time. I should also mention that you're the head of Pacific Research Institute, which is a San Francisco-based think tank. So, Sally, you've been on the case here for quite a while. Are we getting to the end of the national nightmare, otherwise known as Obamacare?
Well, I don't know. I think things are actually getting worse because, as you know, there are 19 candidates seeking Democratic nomination for the presidency, and all of them, I don't know what, actually, I guess today, 20 with Joe Biden entering the race, and I'm not quite sure where he's going to come down on this, but most of the candidates out there, from Bernie Sanders on down the list. Bernie, of course, has his new Medicare for All bill, which is even more comprehensive than his 2017 bill. And he has 4 of the people running for the nomination, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Kamala Harris from California, all co-sponsoring his Medicare for All bill. And then you have a lot of the other candidates pushing what I call stepping stone approaches to single payer, whether it's a Medicare buy-in at 50, Medicare X, public options, Medicare for America, all of these things. So while I think Obamacare is on the ropes, and we've seen, very high premiums, high deductibles, now the number of uninsured under Obamacare has gone up because 1.6 million people, dropped their coverage because of the high premiums and high deductibles. I think, we're really in a very precarious situation because Obamacare hasn't worked. And now the talk is, and the polls are showing that the American people want Medicare for All or single payer, which would mean no private coverage, and the government would be totally in charge of our health care. It's a disaster.
Yeah, it certainly is a disaster. But, I don't buy the polling necessarily. I think people want a solution. And when they ask them a question and they propose single payer as a solution, they say, of course we want single payer, or Medicare for all. But the reality, I think, is something quite different. But this is the distortion through the media lens. What about the concept, though, if the Supreme Court does, in fact, strike down Obamacare, what's going to happen then, Sally?
Well, I mean, right now, as you know, the judge in Texas ruled that in that case, which was brought by 20 Republican attorneys general, he ruled that Obamacare was illegal because the getting rid of the individual mandate made the whole law unconstitutional. That Judge O'Connor, that has now gone to the appeals court in the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans. So we're waiting to see, how that turns out. But it was interesting that the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, was against the case, but has recently switched and said they're in favor of the case and that the individual mandate makes the law unconstitutional. Although the HHS, Alice Azar, Secretary of HHS, and Mr. Barr, the Attorney General, are not in favor of this move that the Department of Justice made. That case, the appeal case, is being brought by a group of attorneys general from Democratic states, led by, of course, California's Mr. Becerra, who is very, very liberal. So we'll see. I know the DOJ has asked the court in New Orleans, the Fifth Circuit, to bring this case to up by July. So they've asked to step up the timing. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that whichever way it goes, I think definitely this case is going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it should be good that we have Mr. Kavanaugh on the case, on the court now, as well as Justice Gorsuch. So we shall see. But it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. So switching back, we know how awful and how potentially devastating single payer is, but you can never really emphasize enough how bad this really is. How bad is it, and why should you be against it?
Well, I think the thing is that, as you know, I mean, if people think about programs that are run entirely by the government, they kind of shudder. And in fact, in the latest Kaiser poll, where 71% of people they polled, and I agree with you what you said about polling, agreed that they supported Medicare for all and that healthcare was a right. But when you ask the same people, well, if this means a tax increase, and it also means that you would lose your private coverage, that support goes down to 37%, because I think a lot of people polled think, oh, Medicare for all sounds like a great idea. But I'm one of the 170 million Americans who has employer-based coverage, and I really like it. So that's very interesting. The thing with Medicare for all, meaning there is no private coverage at all, this is going to mean a variety of terrible things for Americans. And I think the examples in Canada, where I'm from, and the Great Britain, the National Health Service, really need to be put out there, because with the government full takeover of the healthcare system, we're going to see long waiting lists for care, just like in Canada and the UK. The average wait today in Canada from seeing a primary care doc, getting treatment by a specialist, is 19.8 weeks, almost 5 months. Care is rationed. And so the older you are, the less likely you are going to be able to get care, because they will have actuaries figure out what is the value in dollars of your life and what is the cost of that care. And if the cost of care is more than what they value your life at, you won't be eligible for care. There will be tremendous tax increases. And we've seen with Bernie Sanders' latest S1129, which is more comprehensive than his previous 2017 bill, because he's adding free long-term care to his plan. The Charles Blay House at the Mercatus Center costed it out at $32 trillion over 10 years. And I think that number is low, because no government program ever costs what people estimate it to be. And, he is in his plan, which would eliminate private insurance. He's also added in addition to the long-term care, free dental, free vision, free drugs, and free hearing care. Those things aren't even part of the Canadian healthcare system, where you see these long waits, ration care, and the average Canadian family pays $13,000 a year in hidden taxes to pay for sitting on a waiting list. So these plans would be a disaster. We're going to see on April 30th, next Tuesday, the Democrats, for the first time in the House, are going to hold a hearing in the Rules Committee on Representative Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill that she has out there. Hers is even more comprehensive than Sanders' bill, because she wants to phase in the single-payer system within 2 years. Bernie says it can be done over 4 years. So the American people need to know that these are the consequences that they will see. And if they think about it, what do they think about going to the DMV, when the DMV is the monopoly provider of car insurance? If you look at the post office, many people, because there is competition against the post office now with DHL, UPS, and FedEx. So, I use one of these services if I want to make sure something can get there. But if the government fully takes over the healthcare plan, as Sanders, Jayapal, and all these people are talking about, that won't be possible.
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, these things are pipe dreams. To think that the government can offer a service, a higher quality service for less money to more people than the market can, is absurd. We've seen it fail over and over again. Every sector of the economy that is really in trouble, you just have to look at the government and you see why, whether it's healthcare, because they're so ingrained with Medicare and Medicaid, whether it's college student loans, student loan debt, where they become the only lender to students for student loans under very draconian terms for many, and so many other things. You just have to look to the government putting its thumb in the pie, and what's going to happen here. And yet people want to believe, Sally, they really want to believe that somehow the government has a magic bullet.
Well, Carrie, what we've seen with the report that just came out from the Medicare trustees on Medicare, and they have shown that Medicare Part A, the hospital part of the Medicare program, will be now bankrupt by 2026. And just think of the number, I think it's 10,000 baby boomers are joining the ranks of over 65 every single day. So if this program is going, bankrupt today, and as we've seen today, there are going to be many more people on Medicare. And so it's going to put more pressure on Medicare. So how in the world is a single payer Medicare for all system going to be able to survive? As Charles Blay House pointed out, if we doubled all of the personal income taxes and the corporate taxes, it wouldn't be enough to cover the cost of Bernie's plan, which also includes new taxes, a new 4% income tax, a new tax on the wealthy, an estate tax of 77%, a new tax on large financial institutions, an increase in the payroll tax. All of these things, are going to be anathema to the American public, and particularly when they realize what it's going to do to their ability to get good health care.
Yeah. It's obvious. It's as plain as the nose on your face, and yet they don't want to accept it. Just like they don't want to accept that Trump didn't collude with the Russians. They want to believe that there's some magic box in Washington that takes a little bit of money and turns it into a lot, and just improves everything. But it's so unrealistic. You would think that people would figure this out by now.
Well, you absolutely would. But I think the left, and particularly the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, has really spent a lot of time telling the American people that, you as a citizen or as an illegal are entitled to all of these programs. And we're building an entitlement society where, in particular, young people, millennials, don't see why they shouldn't have free healthcare, free college education, no loans, all of these things, and they don't realize where the money comes from. Government doesn't have money. We, the taxpayers, provide the government with the money to provide for these programs. And I think the American people need to realize, even when Bernie Sanders was on that Fox town hall, I think it was last week. I mean, the people were, the crowd, the people in the audience were cheering Bernie on. Do you think healthcare is a right? And they're cheering, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was no one saying, well, hold on a minute. What does it mean when the government provides your healthcare? You're going to lose your private coverage. Your taxes are going to go up. You're going to face long waits, just like in Canada and the UK. They needed to have somebody to say, hold on, these are the realities of what it means when government takes over your health care fully.
Yeah, but there's no more grown-ups here in the Democratic Party, Democratic Socialist Party. There's no one, if Joe Biden is our hope here, he hasn't come out for Medicare for all yet, but I'm sure he'll have something awful. No, it'd be interesting to see
what he says.
He'll have something awful. You know it. It's not going to be, it might not be quite as awful as Bernie care, but it's going to be awful, let's face it.
Well, and I think, we were talking about this earlier and we talked about it before. I mean, I think President Obama, with Obamacare, well, he said, he wasn't, supporting single payer when he brought in Obamacare. He wanted to reduce the cost of care. He wanted to eliminate the number of uninsured. But because he realized people like their private coverage, he didn't want to go there. But prior to being president, he supported single payer. And now that he's out of office, he supports single payer. And I always felt that the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act was really a stepping stone approach to single payer.
Yeah, it was basically designed to fail.
Right.
So where does this leave us here, Sally? What are we supposed to do?
Well, I think that the issue is the Republicans, unfortunately, seem nervous about talking about health care and about we need to achieve universal coverage. You need universal choice. We need all kinds of different types of plans, just like we have in every other part of our lives. Why should young, people, the young invincibles, have to buy a healthcare plan with all of these 10 essential health mandates like in vitro fertilization, maternity care, all of these things? People should be able to get a plan that suits their needs. For those people, there are only about 6 million people in the U.S. in the private market who have pre-existing conditions. The majority of these people, when the Democrats talk about 120 million with pre-existing conditions, most of them are in the employer market and they can't have their insurance taken away, nor can they have the price be pushed way up. So we need to have choices for people, and this will lead to universal coverage. But I think people like you, people like me, people that need to educate Republicans and the American public about why taking over the healthcare system would be a complete disaster for their own healthcare, because people don't understand. If something that's free sounds like a great idea, but you have to tell them what the consequences are. A, it's not free, and what it'll mean for your care.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's it. I think you hit the nail on the head. Education. The Democrats are always saying education is the key to everything. And then you find out quickly that when you really start examining many of their half-cocked, insane projects, they don't really care about education. It's all about power and having their way, right?
Exactly. It's about moving our, Bernie Sanders on the Fox town hall said, oh, well, when it was another event that he did, and a young student from, I think, Harvard said her parents came from Russia to get away from socialism.
Correct.
He said, well, I'm not talking about the socialists, about Russia. But Bernie Sanders and his wife went to Russia on their honeymoon back when it was the Soviet Union. That's exactly what he wants for this country.
Yeah, exactly. So he really was disingenuous. You know what? He out and out lied, right? When you get down to it, he just lied about who he is. I mean, he's there. You see the movies. He had the home movies of him visiting Russia. He thought it was a worker's paradise. And, good for other workers, but not for him. He's been in the workers' paradise, the United States Senate and Congress, for his entire life. The guy never had to meet a payroll, never had to worry about where his next paycheck was coming from. He's a total and complete fraud. and he's spurning other frauds. Hopefully, Sally, this is going to blow up in their faces. We can only hope and pray. Hey, any questions or comments out there about what Sally said or anyone else you've heard on the show recently? Just email me, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page Financial Survival Network. Sally, tell us where we find your work.
It's available on our website, www.pacificresearch.org.
All right, pacificresearch.org. We'll have a link to it in the site. We always appreciate you coming on, Sally. Keep up the fight.
I will. And you too. Thanks, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.